Hey everyone, welcome to PunkCast. My name is William Maxwell. I'm a student of Web3 and the owner of Punk5342. CryptoPunks are 10,000 uniquely generated characters stored permanently on the Ethereum blockchain. No punk is the same. This is a show dedicated to celebrating the punks behind the punk. My hope for this podcast is that we capture the essence of the punk culture, elevate the brand and the individual behind the punk. One last thing. Projects discussed on the show is not financial advice. Crypto and NFTs are a volatile and risky asset class. Please always do your own research. Other than that, let's go. Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of PunkCast. Today we've got Punk5342 with 4 attributes: earring, cigarette, do-rag, and pirate eye patch. In real life, he's one of my favorite NFT photographers. His pieces are loved by punks and held by some of the biggest collectors in the space. He's also featured on Super Rare, Foundation, and Proof Collective. Please welcome pirate punk Derech to the show. Derech, how are you, man?
Hey, all good, man. Thanks for having me here.
Of course. Been wanting to have this conversation for quite some time. Felt like just yesterday when you just first bought your punk. I remember Twitter going wild just to sort of welcome you in the typical way that we do.
It feels like yesterday, but it feels like an eternity at the same time. Like, it's just so weird how fast time passes over here.
Yeah, absolutely. 3 months feels like 3 years in crypto for sure. But I'm assuming Derech is your real name, your doc's real name, so won't go into how you sort of came up with the handle, but might be good to introduce yourself and share a bit of your background, and I think we can talk about everything leading up to NFTs.
So I'll divide it into 2 parts. On the professional side, I'm Mexican. I used to live in Mexico. And as a lot of you might know, Mexicans are very hard hustlers. So we tend to do everything. Like, I studied industrial design in digital media, but on the side, I would also paint, draw, sculpt, photograph, everything. Everything that I could, I would do it. And it was really interesting because I always had the idea that every discipline adds to any other one that you know. So it's not like if you learn how to, paint and photograph, that they're both independent and they don't have any relationship. I think that both of them complement each other really, really well, especially if you understand how to abstract both and like create your own thing. So for example, from typography design, which was one of the classes that I used to love in college, I took a lot of things for my photography because in editorial and typography design, you have to learn how to create layouts in the canvas. You have to know how to have things proportionate, how to make very, very clean compositions and stuff. And then when you're in photography, you also realize that you have all these elements that are within your canvas. And you have to, at least in my style, I have to find a way to make everything fit so that everything feels like it belongs there and it makes sense. So those are like the little things that I love, just like finding a way to how to weave them together and make them work. Before all this, I used to be a creative director for an interactive agency in Mexico. And we used to make like installations, kind of like team labs for the general public. So the last one that we made was, like a trail of particles on screens. But it was really cool because it was like in the subway. So when people would pass by, you would have like this super huge foot traffic and they would be followed all by particles or different animations that we used to have. So it was really nice. And especially the part of it being for the public was very rewarding because normally a lot of people that had to or that visited the installation were not able to afford going into a museum or a gallery or something. So making art accessible for everybody was something that I had never done before. Like I hadn't experimented what it felt like, and seeing that was something that just like stuck in my head and resonated so much when I started getting into NFTs. So that's a little bit of the background.
Yeah. Just going back a little bit though, I mean, I sort of like asking this question of most guests is like, of all the things you could have chosen, why did you choose industrial design and move into sort of the creative sort of space like growing up?
So actually, when I was a kid, I wanted to be a genetics engineer.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, so it was like completely different.
Like genetic engineers instead of more biology, or
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
Like I was a kid that was like super interested in dinosaurs and evolution and how things happen and why, I don't know, like a dog suddenly comes from a wolf. Like you have a pug and suddenly that pug actually came from this massive, you know, and all those kind of little things really, really intrigued me. It just like sounded mind blowing. Like I would watch documentaries and everything. And I don't know if you watched a movie back in the day called Gattaca.
Gattaca. Yeah. Yep. Ethan Hawke.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I would be like, I want to be there. I want to do this. But I started researching, and when I tried to apply, I realized that the only good school for that was in London. So for a Mexican kid to go to London, it was super expensive, and I would have to leave my family, and it just became a mess. So it didn't happen. But always on the side, I would always be doing art. Like it was just like so natural to me that I didn't even think that I could do it, like that I could do it professionally. So later on, when life just like I started to grow up and I had to start taking life choices, everything always started pushing towards the creative side because it was what was easier, not easier, but like more natural for me. It just like happened, like if I had to make a choice of a job or what to do to start making a little bit of money, I would do something that was creative. So let's say, for example, I would design websites, or I would help somebody with editorial design, or I would design product boxes or stuff like that. But all this was in a very unknowing way that I was actually already doing something that was towards arts. And then when I started having to choose what career to go, I chose first industrial design because I loved the fact of creating something with my hands and having like that real time feedback of whatever I have in my head, I'm putting it down and it's happening. And I also love the very heavy machinery. So just like working with the saws and everything, it just like my hand was mind blown. And then I stayed there for a little bit, learned a little, and even though I really loved it, I decided to change to designing digital media because I didn't think that industrial design had that much of a future as a career for one person. Because basically, I was just doing furniture, and my college only had five careers. So it was fashion, something like graphic design, visual communication design, industrial design, and two more. Mine, design and digital media, and another one which and mine was the one that was super underground. Like designing digital media was something that nobody was studying. Like it was only like super geeky people and the weirdos and stuff. And when I checked like all the classes, they sounded so weird, like stuff that I had never heard before. So I was like, okay, like, this makes sense. Like, if I don't understand this and I'm sort of geeky and I'm starting to always stay like ahead of the trends and I don't get this, that means that there might be something for this in the future. Because it was like generative design, it was 3D, it was 3D sculpting, it was like, I don't know, like a lot of weird stuff. So I entered and yeah, it was a lot of exploration. It was a lot of super creative stuff that I had never tried before. And little by little, trends started to catch up with the whole art world. And generative design started to become something. Creative coding started to become something. And that's when I was like, oh shit, yeah, like this now makes sense.
Like when was this? Just in terms of timestamps.
Whoa, I studied college like 7, 8 years ago.
Still way before before crypto and NFTs came out.
Yeah, it's actually really funny because my teachers that used to obviously teach everything in the classes, they would always be making stuff that I saw like in art blocks and shit. Like when I saw art blocks for the first time, I was like, dude, this is like what I used to study in college. Like, I don't see why this could be special, you know? Like, my teachers were making amazing stuff with generative art. And sadly, because it was such an underground thing and nobody understood it, didn't really have any worth. Like, it was just like, oh yeah, it's this geeky thing that people are doing, and like, so what?
So you did a little bit of generative art?
Oh, a lot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
A lot. Like, I was studying processing, which is basically where you create everything for art blocks. And yeah, like I would actually be studying that like maybe for 3 years straight.
Wow. Okay. And this is way before art blocks as well. So you must have saw something there. Okay. So that was your sort of earlier sort of side. And then what was the second part of your life you were sort of referring to?
Well, all that was happening. On the side, a few years ago, my father passed away.
Sorry to hear that.
And that really fucked me up. I don't know if people can swear in your podcast, but
yeah,
I'm Mexican and we tend to say that people who swear are happier. So I try to be very strict.
Say what you need to say. There's no censorship here, so go for it.
So that happened and that really fucked me up because my family, basically, it's me and my mom.
Yeah.
I don't have any more family. And that was really, really tough because like we didn't have anything. It was not like we had any inheritance or any safety net or anything. So we were down bad, like truly down bad. So I had to find someone or many people who wanted to even donate for him to be buried. Shit.
Wow.
It is always hard to. Basically, we needed a lot of help, a shit ton of help. Thankfully, we went through that. We made it happen. But after that, like the dark times started, and my mom was in shock. So I was a teenager and I had to like figure things out however I could, because it was just like I tend to say like I started growing up like normally you grow up and your parents just like start to guide you and they're like, okay, do this, do that.
Yeah.
For me, it was totally the opposite. It was just like grow and just like twist yourself and see which way works and which one doesn't, and fuck up and try again and try again. And so that's why I say like I made so many things in my life that lead to this that it made sense when I reached NFTs, because all those things added up for now.
Yeah.
So I was really, really lucky that someone gave me a job. Well, I'm Jewish, so the Jewish community decided to help me. And the owner of a shoe factory or sneaker factory gave me a job. But he told me, like, you are going to do this the Jewish way. Like, you're going to start from the very, very bottom. I'm going to be paying you a salary that gives you for your family. Like, you're not going to be earning in like what a janitor would earn.
Yeah.
But you will be doing those jobs because I want you to learn everything. So I started like literally cleaning toilets, cleaning the factory, getting everything down from the trailers, everything. Then I would go to the stores and sell shoes, become a manager, learn to manage the store, then go back to headquarters, learn about inventory. Like, it was a whole thing. And it was amazing because I got a lot of experience about the business side of things. I had been studying a little bit of Chinese before that, so I even learned about imports, exports, and stuff. Sadly, because I started to escalate and, you know, like you start to grow and things, people don't like that. Some people were very salty about it and made my life pretty impossible. So for the time being, I was able to provide for my family, and I did that for a couple of years, and then I had to quit because it just became too much. I was unfortunately linked to somebody that started stealing from the business.
Oh, wow.
I called him out, but the guy had been working for them for over 30 years. So they started to believe him instead of me. So that mud went to me. And then when I quit it, they realized that he was the one stealing. So they even caught him with police and the whole thing.
Oh, wow.
And the last day I remember telling them like, it's really sad that someone that actually cared about you and that had the incentive to come and tell you that this was happening has now to quit because you didn't believe in me, because I actually cared about you. I risked my job telling you this was happening and you
Yeah.
didn't want to believe me. So
What
I don't know
what a
why I
story.
create so much.
No, this is a great story, right? I think it's your personal story and your one to tell, but you sort of seen and done a lot of things and gone
Yeah.
through a lot of pain as well. So and look, and I lost my father when I was 18 as well, so
So
I sort of know what that's sort of like being, trying to figure things out along the way, right? So I can just imagine what of a challenge that would have been for you. But so yeah, so then you got a job, you found your feet again, you left the shoe business. What next?
after I left the shoe business, I gave myself for the very first time a little bit of time to think, because I'm glad that you mentioned you went through the same thing, because probably you'll resonate with this. I never had the privilege of letting things out, because if I cracked, my mom would crack like 20 times harder.
Yeah.
So after that business, I gave me a few months of seeing what to do. And those were like the darkest months for me, because then all these things that I had to like put in the back and not think about and just like leave them on the side, they started to catch up with me and I cracked. This one day I was alone in my room and very dark thoughts came and I was about to commit suicide.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, I was just like, I'm a fucking teenager. I can't, like, in my head, I was just like, I can't fix this. I don't have the power to make the house be what it used to be.
Yeah.
And even though I'm doing everything I can to make it better, I can't. It was too much, and I felt like I was being a burden to my mom. So I was just like, in my stupid head, I thought like, maybe it's better to end things, you know. And my father used to be military, so he had guns in the house. So I went, picked up one, and I was just having this conversation in my head, like sitting down on my bed, and I was like, I'm done. I just can't do this anymore. And I picked up the gun, put it against my head. And I feel it every single day. Like I feel that pressure at the tip of the gun, just like pushing against my skin. And I was just telling myself, like, I can't, I can't. And the moment that I was just about to do it, for some reason, something inside asked me, like, is this truly game over? And I had a rush of images of everything I had lived in my head. And it was just like a movie, like a flashback of like birthdays and friends and trips and everything. And I thankfully didn't do it. I'm really, really grateful that I took on dump. And I told myself, if I'm gonna keep on doing this, I'm gonna do everything under my own terms. Like I don't care if I make the house work again. Sounds very selfish, but I was just like, I don't care if I'm able to support my family. I don't care about anything. I care about being happy and making my life work the way that I
Yeah.
want it to be.
Yeah. So just on that point too, man, this feels like a bit of a therapy session for the both of us, but I've been through, probably not as intense as you, but that sort of thought process where, you're always raised to sort of think about others other than yourself. And the reality is if you can't help yourself, you can't help anybody else. And so putting yourself first is absolute paramount, right? To anything that you do if you want to succeed or help anybody else. And so I think I was grappling with that for the longest time. So I appreciate you, sharing all of that, man. So must have been pretty rough.
It's because it is. It is like I think that only people that went through it will understand how hard it is. Because I don't know how much more family you have.
And yeah, I've got pretty big family, so so I had a bit of a support network there. So that's kind of lucky.
Yeah, like in my case, it was just like I had nobody.
Yeah, it's rough.
Like I would now I'm breaking. It was fucking hard because I didn't know if I was doing anything right, if I did anything wrong. I just couldn't figure shit out. I was just like, whatever life gave me, I would have to do it and give it my best. And if it worked, good. If it didn't, it could not work. It could not work. You know that's the hard thing. Like I could not give myself the chance of letting things not work out because there was so much at stake. So it became like a pressure cook for me. So when I blew up really, really, really hard. And I blow up every time I remember this because it's always there. The pressure is always still there. And again, like my father was an army guy, so I'm used to being very, very pressured. But when I decided to keep on going, I stayed in my house for a couple days, just let it sit and just let things happen. And my best friend, he came to my house one day and he is very geeky. He's super smart. He's a genius. Like, he's that person that I fucking admire. Like, you have no idea. The guy's like absolutely insanely talented and smart and everything. He has all my respect. He came to the house and he was like, yo, you have to get out of here. Which was technically what I used to do to him because he's a coder. He's a super hardcore coder. So he would stay in his house for days and days coding and coding and coding. And I would go and literally pull him out of his office and be like, yo, we need to go out. We need to get you out. Like, let's go for a drink. Let's go for whatever. But you need to see the outer world, you know? And then he did it for me. And he told me, you need to get out. You need to like see something else. And he gave me a camera. And he told me, like, start shooting. That's going to start like shifting your focus. And it did. Like, the moment that I started to have a camera and taking it a little bit more seriously, obviously you put it in front of your eyes and it makes you like get out of your own head or all like those dark thoughts and everything. And I started looking for the complete opposite, which was like beautiful things, really, really beautiful things. So I would go for things that were as simple as like raindrops or like grass moving or like beautiful skies, landscapes, people, like whatever that made me feel alive, that's what I would shoot. So I started doing that. And because I didn't have the resources to keep on like growing as a photographer, like buying more gear and shit, because if you know a photographer or you are a photographer, you know that we have like a gear acquisition syndrome. Like, gear is so sexy that you want to buy lenses and cameras and everything. But I couldn't afford that. So what I did was my camera, I was really lucky that it was Nikon. And it's the only camera that kept the same mount from the very beginning that they started until now. So I was like, oh shit, I can actually buy all the film camera lenses and use it on my digital camera. So basically it wasn't automatic, but you had even nicer quality because you could buy a lens from, I don't know, 1970 and mount it on a digital body. And that would give you something very special that a digital lens doesn't replicate because they're completely different. So I started doing that and exploring, and my photography started to become really good. And because of that combo, it was before the whole film camera trend started. So nobody knew that you could actually do that, or they wouldn't even explore because they thought that vintage lenses were kind of trash. But it was completely the opposite because that gave me a very strong signature style and a lot of knowledge. So people were very intrigued, and I started to create a market around that because it was like, oh yeah, I can shoot this, and it's with this lens that costs like half of the price of what, or 1/3 of the price of what you're paying for a digital lens. But the price that I would be mentioning was already hiked up so that I could get some profit out of it. So I would shoot and publish the photo next to the lens, and people would be like, dude, I want to buy the lens. Like, sure, here it is. And I would just like make it expensive enough that I could go buy another lens, have profit to myself, and keep on doing the cycle. And that's what I say, like, life gives me like that kind of weird paths where if you take the opportunity and you train yourself to understand that opportunity, you can grow a lot.
Yeah.
And that was a discussion I had with somebody that said like, oh, you're just lucky. And I was like, I don't think that that's luck. You just build yourself to understand when those opportunities come. I'm lucky that, oh, those opportunities do come.
Yeah.
But I was trained to know when they were there.
Yeah, there's a saying that were you lucky or were you smart? And I think the response was you were smart enough to know that you were lucky. So
Exactly.
yeah,
Exactly. And it's funny because we hear a lot of times like, oh, opportunities are all over the place. You just have to take them. And I think that it is true. But also, like, the more you do in life, the more you know how to pick those opportunities and make them work, right?
Yeah.
So, because I was doing that, I was also contacted by a very big lens camera maker called Zeiss.
Wow. Huge.
Who, yeah. They're like one of the biggest cinema camera lenses and everything. And they made me their ambassador.
Wow.
Yeah, it was really, really cool because they saw photos that I shot with lenses that were like extremely old, like ridiculously old. And they were like, dude, how did you even like think about that? Because I was even adapting lenses that were like, it was literally the first lens that they made. I adapted it to my camera and I was shooting with that. And they were like, not even we knew that that could happen, you know? And it's really funny because if you see now the whole cinema industry, they're actually doing that. They are buying all those super old lenses that give them very interesting character, and they're applying it to their movie to like all the current cameras.
That's nice. How much are like one of those, vintage lenses worth these days? Just out of curiosity.
Crazy amounts. Like I would buy them for, let's say, a couple dozen bucks. Maybe I would pay like, I don't know, like up to $100 because I couldn't afford more than that, right? So I would like my resources would make me have to research enough to find what was truly underground. So I would go and buy all those for like $150, something like that. And I would create literally a market for them enough to resell them for maybe $200, $300. But right now, if I would have held everything I had, probably like one of those lenses would be selling like easily $4,000 or $5,000.
Wow. That's crazy.
Yeah, it is wild. And it makes total sense because if you think about it, like the lens industries are making today, they don't have nearly as much quality as those lenses because back in the day, they were made out of crystal rock, which is a material that was very hard, that would be very hard to use right now because the machinery they just don't do it anymore. Like people would hand polish all the elements. There were a lot of imperfections in the lenses, which back then was considered something bad. And today, because everything is so standardized towards perfection, people got bored about it. It was like, how much better can you make something that's already perfect? So now the trend is, how do you actually give your movie character? How do you make it stand out? How do you give it this signature style, right? That's why they started going back to all those lenses that had all those weird imperfections to make it like wabi-sabi, like something that's a little bit imperfect. And now it resonates more because it's more unique.
Yeah. So all of this process was happening in Mexico, your hometown?
Yeah. Little by little, once I started doing photography, I started to road trip around the country. I mean, Mexico is like one of the best countries to do that. So I would go, and it sparked a lot my like documentary side. I wanted to meet a lot of new people. So I would go to smaller towns and more remote areas and find new stories to tell. So I would love to go to, I don't know, like very old people and ask them what they used to do and shoot portraits of them or shoot what they were doing or all that stuff. But all of this was super unknowing. Like I never actually trained for it. I was just like, oh, I love this. I love knowing more stories. I love meeting all these people. So I'm just doing it. I was never a book person. I'm autistic and have ADHD. So for me, reading is like a pain in the ass because I fall asleep. So I opted to live the things that you would read. So I tend to tell people it's like, I'd rather go and travel to Myanmar and experience it firsthand rather than reading someone else's idea of what it was. So I would go and shoot stories, shoot people and everything. And I loved it. And little by little, I was just like, okay, I need to start getting out of the country. So because I was doing all this business with the cameras and the lenses and everything.
Was your main business just, I guess, more on the hardware? I mean, were you making prints and selling your prints at all? Yep, at that stage.
I never printed, actually. Everybody asked me for prints, and I don't know, like I was so picky about it that I had to like the fact of having to find a good printer, checking all the process, seeing that everything was exactly how I wanted and everything. That was so much time consuming that I would rather keep on shooting. So I never really printed. So what I had to focus more on was like selling all the camera gear enough to have like profits out of that. And that kind of created more FOMO because people wanted even more my work because they knew that there was no way to get it. And I started to make this weird dynamic where I would choose a country that was very remote, or I thought was very remote, and I would buy a flight in January, but it would be booked until December. So as a teenager, that would give me enough time to save enough money for my trip, right? I had 1 year to do that. So my first trip was to Japan. I came here with two more of my friends. We stayed here for a month, and we were just like jumping all over the place, shooting, enjoying, whatever. It was one of my best trips ever. It was my first time out of Mexico by myself with friends. So you can imagine. And in Japan, it was like the perfect place. And I think that also coming to a country that was so foreign to me and where I didn't speak the language at all taught me a lot about how to connect with other people in a more human way where the language isn't necessary. I learned that you can do signs with your hands, like how far a smile goes, how to be like very humble and how to be very respectful and like break the ice a little bit with people in a different way than I normally would so that they would let me shoot them. And I had a fucking blast. And I was just like, I need to do this every year. So it just became like a pattern that I would keep on doing. And the last trip that I made was back here in Asia. I decided to travel around different countries and just be shooting. And that was on December of 2019, right before COVID. So I left my home. I left December 2019, started my trip in Japan again, came to see some friends that I had met the very first trip, stayed here for 2 weeks. And then I started going, like I was in Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Myanmar, India. But the thing was, my trip was the idea was like starting from Japan and doing the whole horseshoe and ending like all Southeast Asia, like covering as much as I could, right? But unknowingly, once I left Japan, COVID started to become stronger. And I started to hear it on the news. It started to like make more noise where I was, more buzz. And in order to avoid it, like once I heard that the news would be becoming more local, as there would be cases, let's say in Thailand, and I was there, I would fly to the next country, stay there for a little while and fly to the next country. And then it became more local and to the next, right? So it was really cool because I had the chance to travel around countries where normally you would have a ton of tourists, but now there weren't any because everybody had left because of COVID. So I was lucky to meet local people in a very relaxed way, because normally when very touristy countries have all the tourists, they're kind of stressed. But once everybody left, everybody was just like, they could be back to being themselves because they didn't have to worry about how other people perceived them. And I got to shoot places that I would have never been able to. Like, for example, in India, I was able to shoot the Taj completely empty. Like, that's something that nobody gets. I shot it also from behind, which is something that doesn't happen. I got to talk to families in a very flawless way. I don't know, like, it was just amazing. And the things started to really take a twist when I was in India, because I think after the first month of traveling there, COVID got really bad. It stopped being this very localized thing and it started to become a pandemic. So that was the moment where COVID had struck so much Asia that now it was expanding to the rest of the world. So India made a statement where it was just like, basically all the foreigners have to go back home. You can't book a flight other way to any other place that's not your home country. So it was a mess. Like, imagine all the flights were getting canceled. It was super hard to find one that would go back to your country, and it was just like a gamble because you could book a flight, but you didn't know if it would actually fly out. So there were a lot of backpackers that were buying their flight, and unfortunately they would get their flight canceled, and they couldn't do anything because the companies didn't return the money in the moment. So basically, the government had given you 1 week to leave the country, but in order for you to receive your money back from the company, you had to wait 2 weeks. So imagine if your budget was really low and you spent the money on the flight, and now you have to wait for it to be reimbursed. And by the next one, you were fucked.
Yeah. Rough. Yeah.
So it was a super tense moment. Like, it was horrible. But I was very lucky that I was kicked out of the very first one because I tried to fly to Malaysia. Because in my head, I was just like, okay, Mexico is really far. I'm going to try to leave to Malaysia, which is the closest hub. And from there, I can just move wherever I can. And I booked it. I was really lucky that the government didn't catch me and I was able to get that flight. Checked in, was walking towards my flight, got into the flight. And right when I got in, I got kicked out because Malaysia closed their borders. So I wasn't able to enter the country. And after that, I tried to book a flight to Mexico, but my bank didn't let me pay. The card was rejected because I couldn't verify an SMS. I can't believe that still happens, and I had to trade one of my lenses with a friend for a ticket. So he basically took the lens as a payment. That did go through. So my flight was India, Japan, United States, Mexico. I left India, came to Japan. I was waiting for 2 hours. And during those 2 hours, everything got canceled. Like, there were no inbound or outbound flights. There was no way to get out of the country. And I just remember, like, I was sitting in on my table and just like eating my sandwich and chilling. And suddenly all the screens turned red.
Oh, God.
And all the people inside the airport were just like super stressed. Nobody understood what was going on. And it was just like, oh, yeah, I'm fucked. But at least I was in Japan. Well, I was just like, okay, I have friends here. I'm okay. Like, it's going to be fine. So I entered the country, told my friends, like, oh, can I crash with you a little bit? This is happening. So they opened the doors of their house and I was just like chilling for 2 weeks. And suddenly, after the 2 weeks, Japan confirmed that COVID was actually a thing. Because during those 2 weeks, Japan was like, I think, one of the very few countries that was super relaxed about COVID. Like, because they had the Olympics coming. So they couldn't acknowledge that COVID was so strong that it would cancel their Olympics. So everything was totally fine over here.
Yeah.
But suddenly they announced like, oh, it's actually really, really bad. And we're locking everything. We're canceling Olympics. We're starting isolation. And we don't know for how long this is going to go. So I was really lucky. Well, first, my friends were like, yo, like, we can't have you in the house for that long. You have to find somewhere to stay. And I was really lucky to find a hostel that took me in and decided to host me. At first, the announcement was for another 2 weeks. And after those 2 weeks passed, they said, like, we don't know how long this is going to go for. So I was the only guest in the hostel. And I remember that day that I went down to the reception and I told the manager, like, okay, we need to have a talk. Like, I don't know what's going to happen. And the manager was kind enough to tell me, like, yeah, when we heard the announcement, we thought about you and we we called the owners to see what we could do, and the owner said that you're good. Just check your bank balance and see whatever you can pay. Like, don't worry about the normal fees. You decide what price you want to pay, and we're fine with it as long as you have food and enough to whatever. I was basically paying like 1,000 yen, which is $7 per day. Yeah, it was really, really low. And they basically became my family because like I didn't know anybody else, right? So I was like, it could have been like a reality show because I was just like, you could see me like my room, then I would go down to the common area and be studying Japanese, or I would be cooking, or like it was just me living there and nobody understood what I was doing. And they would like take me around like the district and teach me stuff and invite me to their staff dinners, and it was just really nice. But at some point, obviously time passed and it was so much that my money ran out, and I started sharing my stories on Instagram, and I was like, yeah, like this is what's happening. This is a true reality of isolation, of COVID and everything for someone that got stranded in the country. People were kind enough that they asked for my address in Japan, or the hostel's address, and people were donating me food because I was eating only once a day. And they would buy things through Amazon and ship them to my hotel. And suddenly things got so bad that I had to sell my last camera lens. And I shared that story, and Zeiss contacted me and they were like, yo, we're sending you something. And they shipped me a new lens with, it was so cute. Like it was like a huge box with the lens and like a ton of groceries, like random groceries that they had gotten for me, and like letters from people from the, and someone even had the beautiful touch of sending like handmade face masks that their mom had made for them, and they sent me some so that I could take care of myself. And I don't know, like that made me fall in love with the country. It was just like, I love Japan. Like people were super, super nice to me.
Yeah, that's cool. Such a cool story.
And they even put like Post-its on the things to like make me feel better with little notes and stuff. So it was crazy nice.
So this was in Tokyo, and again, can you just maybe timestamp this so we know where this is at? This is like 2020.
That was 2020, like June.
Okay.
And it was peak COVID, like peak. So the only thing that I could do was, as a photographer, Japan was already in hardcore isolation. Like the government was saying, like there wasn't this strict rule about you can't go out to the streets, but Japan is all about like, we suggest you to please not do this. So everybody would stay at home. But because I'm a documentary photographer, I felt like this itch or this need of, holy shit, like this is a historical moment and I need to shoot this. I need to capture what's going on. So the first times I tried to take the trains and stuff and travel around the city, but at some point I couldn't afford it because even the trains were too expensive for me. So the people from the hostel would lend me their bicycle, and I would just basically mount the camera on the tripod and be riding around the whole city and just shoot around. And at some point, because of my background of 3D design, I saw that a lot of friends were jumping into something called NFTs. And one of them decided to open a group of very close 3D artists that he knew. And he started saying like, okay, this is starting. Like there's something called NFTs where all the artists are able to finally sell their work to collectors. So I strongly suggest that you jump into it. And I had no experience on blockchain. I didn't even, I knew what Bitcoin was. I knew what had happened and that it had blown up and everything because my best friend was one of those who actually had a shit ton of Bitcoin. Unfortunately, he lost it on Mt. Gox. But yeah, he had a lot. And when I told him like, yo, I want to give this thing a try, he was super nice and he guided me and taught me everything I needed. But at the same time, he was like, the first thing you need is a ledger. You need to have something that's gonna keep you secure. Like his prior experience taught him. So he ordered me a ledger. He bought me a bit of Ethereum, and I started jumping on spaces. And I was just like, imagine like back then when everybody was bored and there was nothing going on and shit. And suddenly this random guy starts telling his story of, oh yeah, I'm here stranded in the middle of Japan. Everything here is completely empty. Like I would be talking while I was walking around Shibuya, like it being like absolutely deserted. So it was something really cool because people would be like, whoa, like nobody is going through something like this, right? So it started to resonate a lot with people. And then they would tell me like, do you have anything minted? I didn't even know what something minted was. So I would start like giving it a shot and minting some of my work and stuff. And suddenly it was really cool because my very first collector was actually, back then it was called Band Vault, but it was run by Andrew Jiang, the guy from Curated. And I didn't understand how big he was. He was like my very, very first person. And then from there was like Pixel P. And I started to meet a lot of very big names. But again, like I didn't know anything about NFTs or blockchain. So I didn't understand how big of the collectors they were. But it was really nice because that started catching up. And while all that was happening, I got really lonely and jumped on Tinder. And suddenly I found this other girl that was a photographer, and she had like a very straightforward profile that said like, I'm not looking for relationships, I'm not looking for anything like that. I'm looking for other photographers or models who want to be with me, who want to shoot, go around the city or something, because people needed that. People needed connection, and because it's Japan, it was really hard to know who wanted to go out. So I was like, oh shit, this sounds really cool. So I swiped right and we matched. I didn't even know how she looked like because all her photos were photos that she had shot. So we met, we went out. I asked her to come close to where I was because there was like a very nice traditional temple, like the one that everybody, when you come to Tokyo, everybody goes to. So it was like, oh, it would be really nice to shoot around here. So it was really fucking funny because I wasn't eating enough. I would fill myself up with coffee because I didn't even have energy. So let's say I told her like, oh, let's meet here at 6. So she was traveling all the way from central Tokyo to the outskirts where I was. And while she was in the train, I called her and it was like, I'm so sorry. Can we delay this for 1 hour? Because I have a problem. And she thought that I was basically like canceling on her. And she got super pissed off at me. And she was like, dude, if you don't want to do this, just tell me, you know? I was like, no, I'm like that serious. Like I have an issue. Like I was drinking coffee and I had like this coffee box of like 1 liter and I had just been chugging it. So I was shaking like fucking crazy. And I said, here, like, look at my head. Like I'm fucking trembling. Like I was like, what the fuck is going on with you? Dude? Like, so we moved it a little bit. She just like hung out while I was like calming down. And I met her. We had a super nice time. Imagine like I was telling her like all this story that I'm telling you right now. So she was just like flabbergasted. She was like, I can't understand how someone has gone through all this, right? And I don't know, it clicked on me, and I was like, wow, this girl's beautiful. Like she's super nice. She's also a photographer, like everything. But so like I had like this thing of, oh, I'm fucked. So I told her like, oh, let's meet again tomorrow. And she was like, yeah, sure, let's hang out, whatever. But that first time that I saw her, like when we finished, we wanted to have dinner, but I obviously didn't have enough money to like take her to a restaurant or something fancy. So we went to a convenience store and bought like sodas and sandwiches and stuff. And there's a small river that runs around where we were. So we just basically had dinner like next to the river and stuff. So it was really cute. And after that, we met the next day, and then we met the next day and the next day, and we fell in love. She one day invited me to her house to have like lunch. And I remember so perfectly, like I came And I even asked her, like, can I grab a sparkling water? Because I had been craving it for a very long time, but because I didn't have the money for it, I never bought it. So she was like, yeah, sure. So I was just like, I opened the fridge, I took the sparkling water, and I saw the middle drawer of the fridge, and I opened it, and it was full of film. So I was like, for a photographer, seeing someone that obsessed about cameras and about film, it was just like, fuck, this girl is amazing. And I think maybe it was like 2 months down the road, I went, sold a little bit of my gear, bought a ring, and asked her to marry me.
Beautiful story.
It was pretty wild. And she was really confused because, like, I asked her first being my girlfriend, and we were just like thinking that things would work out. We were just like being young people, like not caring and seeing how things work. But then I got like dead serious about it, and I was like, I want to be with her. Like, I love this girl. She even invited me to move out of the hostel, and like that event felt like a graduation. Like, oh, he's moving out. He's like, when you move out of your parents' house and you go to your own place, it was like that. Like, all the people from the hostel were like at the reception saying goodbye, take care of yourself and stuff, because they even met her. They were like, wow, this guy is actually like the stranded dude met somebody, and now he's gonna go and live with someone. Like that was just like, so I moved in with her, and I was just like, she took care of me. I felt like a stray dog, and that's, she suddenly opened the doors of her house and fed me, took care of me. She even took me to the doctor because of all that things that had happened. Like, I was pretty screwed up. And who do you meet that does all that for you, Like, she was amazing, but on the side, she would do all that. So I was just like, I don't need other proof. Like, I want this person to be my person. So I asked her to marry me, and I told her, like, I don't know how things are gonna work out, but they will work out. I only ask you to trust me and trust the process. Like, and she was like, but you don't even speak Japanese. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I'll make things work, but just, I need your trust. And she was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's see how things happen. She said, oh, so the proposal was really funny. We were at her house. I actually wanted to do something really special for her, and like booked a nice restaurant and everything. And for some reason it got canceled. And we were here, and suddenly, like, I had the ring, which I had to actually even buy like secondhand because I couldn't afford like a ring or like a first, like, out of store ring. And we were at her we were on her terrace, and it was just like, we were just talking, and I like, she was turning around to the other side, and I pulled it out of my pocket, and I was like, oh, by the way, did you check this out? And when she turned around, I had the ring on my hand, and I was kneeling down, and she was like, no, bitch, no. Like, you're fucking joking. Like, what are you doing? Would you marry me? And she was just like so shocked, and she what's going on? And yeah, she said yes. And you imagine, like, the whole thing, her family is Korean, so that was really tough for me because, like, they were very conservative. So I don't speak any Korean, and they don't speak a lot of English. So it was, and I don't speak any Japanese either. So it was really, really tough to communicate. So it was like a 1 year kind of thing, or like 9 months kind of thing to like try. In the end, they were just like, you know what, we're not okay with it, but you do you. We went to Korea, got married. I went to Mexico to fix all my documents. Like, between all that, like, I had to travel to different countries to just like make visa runs all over the place to be able to return. And finally, like, I went to Mexico, made all my documents. Japan wasn't allowing people to come in. So we were just like, both of us, like, on standby to see when they would open. And this one day they made like an announcement that they were gonna allow like very, very special cases. And the moment that they made an announcement, I ran to the embassy, had all my papers, and like, I was literally sleeping outside of the embassy to be the very first person who they had it. And this Japanese guy like comes over, and I'm like a homeless guy just like laying against the wall, just waiting. And he was like, are you okay? And I was like, oh no, it's because this is happening, and I heard the announcement and stuff. And I told him all this story while people were arriving, because it was like, oh, the office doesn't open like until like 45 minutes or something. So we were just chilling, chatting. And he said, like, give me your papers. I'm the ambassador. I'll take care of your case. I was like, and the very next day he had my visa ready. They called me, I picked it up, went to my house, told my mom goodbye. She was like, I remember that day. She was like crying like hell. And she was like, stay a little bit longer. Don't leave. Wait a little bit. It was like, it's so annoying. Like, I don't know how things are going to go down, that probably Japan could close again. So I need to leave now. And I took a cab, left to the airport, flew to Japan, got over here, and like after a week and a half or two, I got a call from the embassy, and they were telling me that there were very bad news, and they had to cancel all the visas because of Omicron. And I told them, well, bad luck for you, because I'm already here. So you can't cancel anything. And they were like, oh yeah, like, because the whole embassy heard the story. So they were like, holy shit, this guy made it. He's there. So it was like a huge thing. And that's how I ended up here.
Nice. So where would you call home for you now?
Japan.
Yeah. What a colorful, amazing story, man. And does your wife collect NFTs or in NFTs?
She has something that I admire a lot. She isn't into NFTs, but she has a lot of foresight and she understands a lot of tech. She actually works for ad tech right now. So she obviously hears about crypto and NFTs and everything that's going on. So when I told her that I was doing NFTs, I think doing NFT sounds kind of wrong. It sounds like a drug. Like creating NFTs, selling NFTs. She was like, yeah, I like that. Any other wife would have been like, no, like, you're crazy. What the fuck is that? Like, I was like, I'm doing this. Like, it allows me to get an income. I don't know how things are going to go down, but until now, like, things are starting to pick up. So we decided to, because I had been working on the side for an agency here, but like very, very part-time, and they weren't paying me that much. So I was like, okay, we have two very strong decisions to make here. Either I go full-time and ask the agency to hire me and quit NFTs, or we take the gamble and let me do this full-time and create my artwork and engage in everything I need to do, like hardcore. And she said, like, I got your back. Like, I have my corporate job. We're fine. We have our safety net. We're good. Like, if you think that NFTs are your thing, and if that makes you happy, that's all I care about. I want you to be okay.
Mate, sounds like you got a keeper. It sounds like you need to really diamond hand this one. Maybe we could talk a little bit more about your transition to NFTs then. What was your first NFT that you collected? Do you remember?
Like, were they called crazy koalas or something like that? It was like the shittiest thing ever. And after that, like, that was my very first rug. I didn't even understand what a rug was, but suddenly I saw that they weren't doing shit, and I was like, what's going on here? Like, I don't get it.
Everybody has to learn the hard way, right? So I think we've all had our fair share of rugs.
But it was so funny because I think that back then, the sentiment was so positive that nobody even spoke about rugs. Like, I didn't even know that I was in a rug or that I had been rugged. So I was just like waiting to see what would happen, right? And then Dead Fellas started, and I really liked it because they were like zombies and they were cool, and there were this like edgy thing, and I bought one. And I really started to dig the community, and people were super nice. And actually, I scored my first Web3 job with them. I would make, they were super nice, and I told them, like, I was just on the Discord saying my story and everything. And I was like, oh, I need to find a job because, like, my art isn't enough. Like, I can't live with that. And Betty was super nice, and I wanted to also support my mom, but I didn't have enough money to send her. So just like one day, my mom asked me to lend her some money, and I couldn't afford it. So I broke, and I was just like, how do you say, like letting it out on the Discord. And suddenly Betty, one of the founders, just like pinged me, and she was like, "Yo, I heard your story. Here's point ID. Do your thing. Like, give it to your mom." And I was super, super grateful. And I told her like,
That's nice.
yeah, I told her like, I don't want to just tell you thank you. I want to do something for you. So she told me that they were starting this concerts in the metaverse back then in Decentraland. And I told her that my background was actually 3D motion graphics and all that. So I started making concert visuals for them. And it was really cool because like all the holders would gather in Decentraland and we would be playing and stuff. Suddenly Steve Aoki was playing there, and like they had this really cool dynamics. So I was getting like a little bit of a constant flow of income there. And that's how I got hooked.
Nice. And then talk to us a little bit more about your journey to punks then. When did you first hear about punks, and what made you ultimately buy your punks?
One of my very first, again, like my first collectors were Andrew, Pixel Pete, then another guy called Dro. Dro became a pillar in my journey until today. I think we talk every single day. So I'm talking, I've been in NFTs like for 2.5 years. We've spoken every single day. We became really, really good friends. He's been with me through all the journey, and he's super knowledgeable about the whole history of NFTs. So he taught me everything he knew. So he would tell me about like the very beginnings of X copy, of people, of what punks were, like everything that I needed to know as a background. He would tell me because he's super passionate about it. And I was always like, wow, that sounds fucking cool. Like, but back then it was just like a punk was worth like crazy amounts of money. So it was just like this, like one day I hope that I can make it. But it was like so foreign to me and so far that it was just, it's not going to happen. And 2 years down the road, I had been trying to flip. I had been trying to do so many things and it didn't work out. So I decided to like just stop buying shit. And I would just like stack everything I had from my sales. And one day my wife, I was just eating, watching something on my computer, and my wife was like, "Yo, how are we doing? Like, are you good?" And I was like, honestly, I haven't even checked. Like I got to the point where I gave up checking floors, gave up checking balances and everything. I would just like stack everything. And I was like, it's time to see. Like, and I started like to make calculations of what was the floor for everything that I had, plus what I had on in the wallet. And I was like, oh shit, I can actually buy a fucking punk with this. And first it was just like, oh, I have enough for one, but I'm not gonna do this. And then I turned around and told my wife, like, I'm gonna go all in and I'm gonna buy a punk. And her answer was, I was nervous. I was very, very nervous. And her answer was, if you think it's the right move, go for it. I trust you. And back then I told her like it was like $100 and something thousand. And now I think you know enough of my story to understand that that was a shit ton of money for me. Like insane amount.
Yeah. So just looking at the timestamp, it was 6th of March, 2023. So earlier this year, Q1 this year.
Yeah.
And I do remember you sort of coming on the scene, but yeah, I mean, having the context of your sort of background, there was a lot of money to throw into a punk at the time. What made you go in with that much conviction at the time? And the question is has it paid off, do you think, for you?
So from everything that I had seen, and because I was full-time on NFTs, it gave me enough background knowledge to understand what punks were, or at least what I understood as punks. So for me, having a punk was being part of the community that is a builder, that cares about Web3, that cares about NFTs, that creates stuff, that holds everything together. So for me, punk's community was like this spider web, and that everything lands on top of it, but the web is like holding everything together, right? So in my head, I was like, if I'm an artist, and for me, my main goal has always been create a legacy. It's not about the money, but to become somebody and a part of that web. So I was like, I have to be part of this. I have to be part of this. And if I become someone that's part of that web, I also become someone in the world of NFTs, Web3. So it made sense. Like if I wanted my artwork and me as a person to be taken seriously enough and to show the rest of the world like how committed I was to the space, I was like, I'm gonna go all in.
Yeah, it's really interesting that you sort of say that one, you being an artist as well, seeing punks as a form of art, and two, it's another form of signaling in that you've got real commitment to, I guess, as a photographer and especially NFTs in the space. And I think that's a huge signal, right, in terms of how much conviction you've got. So, which is a great thing.
It's because it makes total sense because if you think about it, like for me as an artist, it was just like, I'm not doing anything else than this. Like this is my life right now. And also part of the conviction for me was I had never been able to do in a completely free way what I love to do. So in NFTs, I was basically shooting and doing the artwork that I wanted to create. And I found people who loved what I was doing for what I was doing and for who I was and for who I am. So I was like totally, and I am totally in love with Web3 because if you're an artist, you know how hard achieving something like that is. Because otherwise, the only other route that I would have had was going to galleries and breaking into the traditional art world and stuff. And that's super hard. That's extremely, extremely hard. So
Yeah.
I was like, if I find myself in this space and I already found a little bit of community around my artwork, I want to keep this and strengthen it as much as possible. So I saw the punk as this way of telling myself and telling everybody, like, I'm here for the long run.
Yeah. And it's an important part, right? Because I think that's one thing I look at artists as well, as whether or not they've got a real deep commitment to the space. Because you can even get, traditional Web 2 artists coming in, they've been successful in Web 2, but they've got no real, they'll drop an NFT project, but you don't know if they're going to stay in
Yeah.
NFTs. And that makes a big difference, right? In terms of value accrual as well. But just in terms of your punk in particular, he's a handsome looking punk, cigarette, earring, do-rag, and the pirate eye patch. How were you thinking through traits and attributes? Were you looking for long at which sort of punk you wanted and which one sort of resonates with you?
It was funny because I actually contacted a lot of very big name holders of punks. Because like I was nervous as fuck. I was like, okay, if I'm investing this much amount of money, like at least I want to know that I'm finding the good traits. And all these people would tell me like, oh, like the trends are this. Normally people look for this and that. Most of the people agreed on try to buy a very clean punk because that's like the easiest one or the most common to be able to sell if you need the liquidity. But because I was in it for the long term, I was just like, this is gonna become me. This is gonna become my digital identity. Which was something that really stuck with me when I spoke with Pixel Pete. He told me like, if you're gonna buy a punk, buy something that really resonates with you. And for me, it started with the word punk. I wanted something that was punkish, that was like strong, that had this figure that represented what a punk was. And I actually paid over a floor. Like I think I paid like 10 something each. The floor back then was 62. I think I paid like 74, something like that for it. But I really wanted something that had a lot of character, that whenever I showed it, people would recognize it. Because I did notice that a lot of punks, like clean punks, it would be easier to confuse because it was like so simple. Like, oh, maybe one has a chain and maybe another one doesn't, or maybe one has a beard and the other one doesn't. And so it would be very easy to get lost. And this guy, when I saw him, I was like, this is a badass motherfucker. Like, you'll recognize him. And I bought it and I was just like, I loved it because I found other punks that actually looked like me. Like, I think Ultra just sold one that I was just like, dude, that was me. Like, it was like this wild hair punk. Right now I have it all tight, but if you saw me, it's like all wild and curly, and I smoke and the beard and everything. I was like, holy shit, that one's me. But it was very nice that the one that I have right now, even though it doesn't look like me, it became like my alter ego. So it worked out.
No, he's a real badass, and I love the cigarette. Obviously, not to be sort of super biased, but you can look at the cigarette, and it signals punk vibes, right? You can just sort of see that's really punk, which is kind of cool.
Yeah, I wanted something exactly that said fuck it. You know, like
Yeah. And if money wasn't an issue for you, what punks would you be looking at?
I love the zombies.
Yeah, zombies are cool.
I love the zombies, and for some reason, I think it would have been very eerie. Then one of my first NFTs was a dead fella, which was a zombie, and then escalated all the way to a zombie punk.
That's true. Yeah, nice. And if you were to look across the punk community, do you have any favorite punks or a favorite punk that comes to mind?
As a person or their punk?
As a person?
So many. It's just like it's crazy. And especially now that I'm part of the community, I've gotten to meet everybody. It's like wow. Suzanne is amazing.
Suzanne's lovely.
Fushbao. I don't know how to pronounce it.
Fuchsball. I had her recently as well. Yeah, I struggle as well, but yeah, she's super lovely. A super lovely lady.
Mike Hager, Warren himself, Super Hustler, Snowfro, Pixel Pete.
You mentioned Pixel Pete. He's a lovely guy, amazing guy.
Also Snowfro. He's like the warmest, kindest human being ever.
Absolutely. And if you were to describe punk culture in a few words, how would you describe that for you?
It's just builders and pure love for. I don't even know if to say like NFT or Web3 or internet culture in general. For me, punks are just the symbol of what internet is. And because you and I, we were there before internet, right? And we saw all the signals that said this is happening. So we saw the .com bubble, we saw emails coming, we saw everything happening. And all those signals made so much sense to me when I saw punks, because I was like, this is one of those signals where now all those people that created all those things are now getting together. So I even remember that because of that, I spoke with Kevin Rose, and I was like, dude, I love what you've done. I love because I was super hardcore into Moonbirds and Proof and everything. And I told him, like, I just bought a punk, and I just want to tell you that I respect a lot, like, everything you've done for the art world in NFTs. And I think that was something that got very, very lost with everything that happened with Proof and Moonbirds, shalala. But I think that Kevin Rose did have a huge impact on what art blocks is now and generative art and how it's regarded. And that's the kind of things that happened a while ago that were very, very small and then cut up. And because of all the buzz, people forgot who were those that were building back then and believed in it. Like, for example, Tony Herrera, how much he built, Sergito, Von Mises, for example, like all these people who work a lot behind the scenes. The general public doesn't really know who they are, but a lot of what is happening right now is because of all these people. That's for me what punks were like. They don't really need to be out there and say like, oh, I did this. But the punk represents like, I was there.
Yeah.
You know? And I feel like for me, my punk represents that. Like, if I become, and I'm working as my ass off to make that happen, whenever I become a legacy or something in the art world in NFTs, I want whenever someone sees my punk to think the same thing that I thought about all these people that was there. And I am there.
Beautifully said. Yeah, you're right. I think it goes without saying. There's actually a lot of punks behind the scenes and doing a lot of things. And I must admit, I mean, I've got to give credit to Kevin Rose as well. Even though Proof and Moonbirds probably haven't gone the way that we'd all expected, but his podcasts early on were probably the ones that educated me about art blocks and punks. To be fair, right, and how culturally and important, significant they were. So and these guys were all punks at some stage, right? So I think you're sort of spot on. They're building quietly in the background, which is a nice thing.
Like, I think the people who I respect even the most in the punks community are those who actually minted them, because that means that they never did it for the money. They did it because they they truly enjoyed the culture. So that's how you know like how much of an influence this had on them back then. It's like X copy and everything. Like, he started selling art for $20, $40. He didn't really think that NFTs would be NFTs. Tony never minted a bunch of punks because he thought that they would become something that would be worth thousands of dollars. He just like was really curious. Kevin said it, like, I didn't even know, like, the other day when he appeared in the Telegram, he was like, dude, I had no idea that V1 punks were a thing.
Yeah.
He didn't even know that they were in the wallet, right? So I love when people do things regardless of speculation, and it was because of pure love for the technology. And that's what I see also in my artwork. Like, my work would not be able to live in any other medium that's not NFTs as a digital asset, because it's so translatable to any other canvas. Like, you can watch it in a virtual gallery, you can watch it on your screen, you can watch it on your phone, you could do video mapping, you can do everything. And at the same time, it always keeps a provenance. But if I sold it as just like a video file in a gallery, it would just live in a screen and people wouldn't understand the possibilities that it has. Like, we've seen art blocks having this massive 5-10 meter screens displaying all the artworks and stuff. That's thanks to NFTs. That's thanks to the nature of digital art. And that's how I know that for the art world, this makes so much sense.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. I think the word that always comes to mind when you're sort of describing that is there's something pure, a pure type culture within sort of punks, for ones that sort of claimed and I guess the appreciation for art, right? And I think, you know, some of the stuff that you're doing is actually quite pure too, and we didn't really get an opportunity to really speak to that. But your artwork too, absolutely sort of beautiful, Japanese inspired. Your trademark sort of 3 panels in motion as well, which is different for your typical photographer, right? Not really taking full advantage of, I guess, the motion element. I guess, you know, from your side, like, what was the inspiration for your kind of style, and how would you sort of describe it? I don't know if I've done a good job of it, but how would you describe that?
So I always loved videography or cinematography, but as you might have noticed, I shake a lot.
Too much coffee.
The coffee, and I also have like low blood pressure or high blood pressure. I don't even know. Like, I don't really go to the doctor. I should, but I don't. So that's another thing. But because of the shakiness, I was never able to shoot video because I felt very insecure about myself because everything would be super shaky. And later on, the technology kept caught up, and like now there's gimbals, there's stabilizers. You can stabilize in post-production and everything. So while I was going around the city during the pandemic, Japan or Tokyo in general was really slow. So shooting photography was beautiful because it was easier to like make cleaner compositions, and people were more candid and they weren't as stressed and stuff. So it was really nice because I would get like scenes that normally I wouldn't. And this one day I remember that I was walking around Shinjuku, which is more like the rowdier side of Tokyo. And there was this girl waiting for the green lights to change so that she could cross the street. And she was just like leaning against like one of those posts that is like dividing the road from the sidewalk. And she had like all her shoulders uncovered. She was going to Kabukicho, which is like the red light party district. So she was like really nicely dressed. She had pink hair, like a green shirt, and she was like super pretty. So I was like, I could shoot this as a photo, but I don't think that would translate into what I see, right? So I said, fuck it. I put my tripod and started shooting in video and seeing. Like, I love the idea of unknowingness because I think that my whole life has been like that. As I mentioned, like, I grew up as a weed, like a wild thing. And I think that translated into my artwork I love the element of, I don't know what I'm going to capture when I go out. But I train myself to be able to see those moments that I want to capture. So it's like, life will give me those opportunities to shoot, and I have now the eye to see those opportunities and shoot them. So I put my tripod and I started shooting her, and suddenly like she would make like super nice movements, like because she was waiting, and because she didn't know that I was shooting her, she was just like, she would turn around and like move her hair and stuff like that. And when I shot it, I saw the video and I was like, wow, this is really beautiful. It was like her in the night, like being lit by all the neon signs and stuff. So it just made sense, like all the cars passing by. It was really, really pretty. So that night, I started to do that over and over and over, like shooting videos all around. And when I got back home, I started messing with them. And I love haikus. I love Japanese artwork. So during all those explorations, I'm not good at writing, but I am very good at creating visual narratives. So I was like, what is a haiku? A haiku is 3 lines, 17 syllables. So I was like, I'll translate that into a visual way, which was 3 videos for 17 seconds that just loop in perpetuity. And it made total sense. It was really nice because like I would place all those videos and they would become a short story, and they would be like super meditative, super like very soft, very gentle. And it was just like when you're repeating a mantra or you're repeating something, a lot of in meditation is just repetition until your brain calms down and it just like cleans up. That's what I wanted to create in my art. Like I wanted something that was beautiful enough that you would love to see it, and at the same time, because you saw it so much, it would soothe you. So in the end, that's what happened. Like I had all the feedback from the people that bought my pieces, and they were like, dude, I love this because I can watch it eternally and I just don't get tired of it, and it makes me feel better.
I must say, they are really beautiful pieces, and I picked up a couple for the PunkCast vault. So fortunate enough for that. But mate, I must admit, having this conversation with you today has just added another layer of depth and connection with the pieces that we probably wouldn't have had before. So so yeah, so
Okay.
it's a beautiful sort of piece, man. And really, really happy to see where you are and where you've come from. I think you've blasted on the scene and done really, really well with not obviously the punk community, within the punk community, but obviously with some collectors as well. So full credit to you there, and I'm sure you'll be on to doing some amazing and beautiful things. So I'll be looking forward to what happens next. So maybe one final question. I mean, we could sort of talk for ages on all of this, but one final question before we leave. But if you could pass on a message to the next owner of Punk5342, what would you like to say to him?
Take care of him. It's stupid. I never expected this to break me. But I think that my punk means so much to me. It means it's like the sum of everything that I've lived. And for me, it's my milestone. It's not an asset. It's like I'm making it happen. So I really doubt that someone would have it. But if they have it, it's like, take good care of him because he's been good.
Oh man, that's so beautiful. It makes me want to well up a little bit too, and this is what makes the punk community so special. Is I guess people like you, and these kinds of stories that come out, and people. Yes, it's an expensive NFC, but there's a story and there's a reason behind everything, right? And it's more than just an NFT on the blockchain. There's a lot more things that sort of go to it. So, but Derek, this has been super fun, man, and I appreciate you spending time out of your day to see. Really loved your story and your passion for photography and educating me on different lenses and the like. Hopefully, we can connect one day soon. But I guess any sort of final questions from you, and what's the best place for people to find you?
Well, Twitter right now. And just I think that we have to be a little bit more gentle towards each other. Speculation drives things in a very wild way. And I think that people should realize where we came from and be a little bit more humble and just have a more builder, caring attitude towards each other instead of this entitled way of like complaining about everything and asking when instead of how to help each other and build. So I think that's clearly something very important, like returning to our roots and caring for each other and making this ecosystem grow.
Absolutely. Beautifully said. Derek, thanks again. And guys, thanks for listening to another episode of PunkCast. And we'll be back next week with another punk. Bye for now.